Hunter Biden put then VP dad Joe on the phone with business associates at least 24 times. According to Devon Archer, who was a business partner to Hunter Biden, who is going to be testifying before Congress, and they've put this information out already. Devon Archer, of course, is facing some serious criminal charges. Now, it's a tough segment to do, because I know that you know this is obvious. This news is not earth-shattering to anyone. The left will not accept it. Liberals will completely ignore it. Conservatives already know this and expect more. So what is it? What's the point? Man, honestly, I really don't know. I mean, let's think about the implications for 2 seconds. Is it ultimately that we are trying to sway some semblance of a middle ground? Perhaps. We saw the polls. If the American public knew about Hunter Biden's laptop, I think it was between like 6 and maybe even as high as like 11% of people said they would have voted for Donald Trump. And perhaps there are a lot of people who are finally being convinced by all of this stuff. Fair point. But I think the bigger question here is, what does it all mean? And in the bigger context, I'm going to say it. So get ready to pour yourselves a shot. Civil war. Yeah, I know. What does that really mean? What does it refer to? It's tough. I'll say it like this. My understanding of civil war is typically defined as 2 factions fighting for control of one government. The definition's been expanded because of the American Civil War to basically mean when 2 factions fight for control of one government or to dissolve an existing governmental structure of some sort. And that was because they wanted to bring in the American Civil War because the South wasn't trying to take over D.C. They were trying to secede from the Union. However, it did ultimately change later on, and then things got a whole lot crazier. The Confederacy actually invaded the North, and oh boy. So let's think about that for 2 seconds. Right now, we may be in a more of a bleeding Kansas type phase, and you've heard me talk about this before. This was the period before the Civil War, which was effectively a smaller civil war. There was conflict, fighting, murder, shooting, etc. in Kansas because they were fighting over whether or not it would be a slave state or a free state. And it never ended. Bleeding Kansas just carried on throughout the Civil War. Where are we now? Well, aside from the fact that we know Hunter Biden and his dad were doing illicit business dealings, that's a fact. No criminal charges. We have even the New York Times running the story. I'm sorry, this is the wrong New York Times. Here you go. IRS whistleblowers allege political bias in Hunter Biden investigation. 2 veteran investigators spent several hours detailing to a House committee the ways in which they believed President Biden's son received preferential treatment. So we know about that, and then we have this. Michigan charges 16 in false elector scheme to overturn Trump's 2020 loss. They say among those facing felony charges was Michonne Maddock, a Trump ally and a former co-chair of the Michigan Republican Party. Did they actually do anything wrong? No, they didn't. And I've got historical proof. I can show you exactly what this is and how they did nothing wrong, but they're being charged with like fraud and conspiracy. Why? Well, you see, you're in a civil war and only one side is fighting. You've got Fox News reportedly matching donations to like the Satanic Temple or whatever. Their ratings are in the gutter. You've got Republicans issuing strongly worded letters. And you've got Democrats letting criminals go, quite literally, in tons of different cities, ignoring the crimes of the Biden family, and prosecuting their political opponents, including Donald Trump, as well as these Republicans we see in Michigan. Now, that's some serious stuff. Now, you may be saying, Tim, civil war is when 2 sides take up arms and they march towards each other and they draw lines. Yeah, okay. All right, well, then tell me this. Serious question. What would you call it when there is no need for direct physical confrontation because one side drops to its knees and says, I'm so sorry, please spare me? I guess you wouldn't call it a civil war. I suppose you could call it a revolution? Maybe. I don't know. Not so much, really. I mean, look, there is a cold civil war. There is some kind of cultural battle. There's an information warfare. We are in it. And we are watching the weaponization of the government in real time. Even when there's a Republican House committee on the weaponization of government, quite literally having Devon Archer testify, Michigan criminally charges people for doing nothing wrong. Now, I know the Democrats and liberals who may be seeing this are already saying there was a scheme to issue false electors for Donald Trump. Yeah, I'll get into greater detail, but I don't want to bury the lead here. Just show you this right here. This is the Wikipedia entry for the election between JFK and Richard Nixon. And I need only search Hawaii to show you that in this election, Democrats, despite losing, had their electors issue the votes. And guess what? After a court ruling some months later, they decided, you know what? Even though the Democrats were not certified and the Republicans were, we're going to give it to JFK instead. Now, that's really interesting. How did these electors convene? Well, I'll read more into that for you in a bit. They say there were clear discrepancies in official electoral tabulations, and Democrats petitioned for a recount. This is basically what happened in Michigan and other states. The electors who were for the Republicans were not elected. This is how it works. When you vote, you're electing electors. You are voting for an elector. The Democrat elector gets elected. He votes for who he wants. And there were some attempts at faithless electors. But in this instance, back in the 60s and in 2020, the losing side, presumably, decided we're going to issue the papers and have them ready because if a court does issue this ruling, we need these documents, as they did in, 1961. 1960 election, I believe. But let's first read about Hunter Biden's abject corruption from the New York Post. Hunter Biden would dial in his father, then Vice President Joe Biden, on speakerphone into meetings with his overseas business partners, according to testimony expected before Congress this week from Devon Archer, the first son's former best friend. Archer, 48, who is facing jail for his role in a $60 million bond fraud, is scheduled to testify to the House Oversight Committee about meetings he witnessed that were attended by Joe Biden, either in person or via speakerphone, when Hunter would call his father and introduce him to foreign business partners or prospective investors. Quote, "We're looking forward very much to hearing from Devon Archer about all the times he has witnessed Joe Biden meeting with Hunter Biden's overseas business partners when he was vice president. One such meeting was in Dubai late in the evening of Friday, December 4th, 2015, after a board meeting of the Ukrainian energy company Burisma, which was paying Hunter $83,000 a month as a director. Archer, who also was a director, is expected to testify that after dinner with the Burisma board at the Burj Al Arab Hotel, he and Hunter traveled 6 miles north to the Four Seasons Resort Dubai at Jumeirah Beach. I'm having a hard enough time pronouncing words as it is. To have a drink with one of Hunter's friends. While they were sitting outside at the bar, Vadim Pizharsky, a senior Burisma executive, phoned to ask where they were because Burisma's owner, Mykola Zlochevsky, needed to speak to Hunter urgently. "Can you ring your dad?" Soon afterwards, the two Ukrainians joined Hunter and Archer at the Four Seasons bar, and Pizharsky asked Hunter, "Can you ring your dad?" At the time, it was early afternoon Friday in Washington, D.C. Hunter then called his father, put him on speaker, placed the phone on the table, and introduced the Ukrainians to Joe by name as Nikolai and Vadim. He also said words to the effect that Burisma's bigwigs need our support. VP Biden greeted Ukrainians but spoke only in vague pleasantries during the short call. And in other such interactions with Hunter's overseas business partners, Archer is expected to testify. So it'll be interesting to see what he actually says. What did Joe Biden say? Did Joe Biden say, "I want to be involved in this"? Did he say, "You better do what my son says"? We don't know. That we will hear. Now, I hear from liberal commentators that while Donald Trump was president, you had Middle Eastern business dealings with the likes of Jared Kushner. You had Ivanka Trump getting trademarks in China while Trump was involved in some other political business dealings. I'm not a big fan of this. I know. And Donald Trump tried to use Trump Doral for, I think it was the G7. I'm not a big fan of this. I think it's bad. I think it's wrong. The State Department I believe it was in Scotland, I could be wrong, was running advertisements for one of Trump's resorts or something. Also wrong. I think these things are bad. I think in many instances, you've probably got some ethics violations. But if Donald Trump wasn't directly involved in these dealings, what am I supposed to say? That, of course, his family members were utilizing foreign experience and doing these deals? Not good things. But I don't know how you separate any of this stuff. I'm not saying Trump should be absolved of any potential wrongdoing. I am saying quite literally investigate him for those reasons. But they won't. Why? Because the Bidens are in trouble for that. If they were to come out and say Donald Trump's family was involved in foreign business dealings, enriching themselves, they'd have to go, whoopsie, the Clintons and the Bidens and the Obamas, and it goes entirely down the line. Lock them all up for all I care. Trump family included, if that's the case. No special treatment. Hey, you want to go one step further? I want answers on the commando raid in Yemen that resulted in the death of a little American girl, Abdurrahman al-Awlaki's little sister. These are allegations. But I'll say it clearly and plainly. If it is true that Donald Trump ordered a commando raid, which resulted in collateral damage, the death of an American citizen, we got a big problem on our hands. It should be investigated. There should be some accountability. But this is a big difference in Barack Obama ordering a drone strike on a civilian restaurant in Yemen, a country we are not at war with, killing a 16-year-old American citizen. Both are really bad. Both should be investigated. But you know what? They won't do it because if they go after Trump, they got to go after every single person down the line who did worse. My point is this. I don't care for any of the corruption, malfeasance, or otherwise. If there is credible evidence, a preponderance of evidence, we can initiate an initial investigation. And if we see some criminal wrongdoing, we move. But now they're going after Trump on these records. Now they're going after, they're claiming that Trump did wrong with his business dealings. Yo, you don't get to sit there and say, we're not going to go after Biden because Trump did it too. Now I take the opposite approach. Oh, we're gonna have to lock up the Biden family, and then we're gonna investigate the Trump, see if there's anything there. I don't care. I am totally for it. You know why? If Trump committed crimes, lock him up. If he didn't commit crimes, then don't waste our time. Don't interpret things which are dubious and legally vague as criminal only if Trump does it. That's the issue I take. I'll put it simply. Anybody who commits a crime, okay? To be fair, there are certain crimes where we have legal challenges on them, like gun control issues and certain drugs. Yeah, I get it. Take up with the courts. But we cannot exist in this multi-tiered justice system where Donald Trump can fart and get arrested for it, and Joe Biden can literally be on the phone 24 times on these illicit business deals. And get this, when Donald Trump uncovers this, they impeach him for it. You want to talk about civil war, my friends? Let's go there. Take a look at this story. Let's get into the nitty-gritty details. The Michigan Attorney General announced felony charges on Tuesday against 16 Republicans for falsely portraying themselves as electors from the state in an effort to overturn Trump's 2020 defeat there. This is a lie, an outright lie from the New York Times. Each of the defendants was charged with 8 felony counts, including forgery and conspiracy to commit forgery, on accusation that they had signed documents attesting falsely that they were Michigan's duly elected and qualified electors for president and vice president. They weren't the duly elected and qualified electors, and each of the defendants knew it. They carried out these actions in the hope and belief the electoral votes of Michigan's 2020 election would be awarded to the candidate of their choosing instead of the candidate that Michigan voters actually chose. Here's a question. If I go outside and proclaim that I am a king or whatever and sign a document hereby decreeing I own land, is that a crime? Is that illegal? That's ridiculous. Now, they're making the argument that because they said they were duly elected elector, duly qualified electors, and they were elected, etc., that it was fraud because they were attempting to trick people into thinking they were the elected electors or whatever. There's a legal dispute going on. What is to be done? You've got two sides in an actual legal dispute. So they fill out the paperwork and they say, let's see what happens. And guess what? They did not win. Biden got elected and it was all over. But now they're gearing up for the insurrection claim against Donald Trump to try and remove him from the ballot. And, look, I got to tell you, you got Ron DeSantis coming out. And he says he gets attacked more by the corporate press than even Trump because they're scared that DeSantis can actually beat Joe Biden. Look, despite his bad polling, I really do think DeSantis has a strong shot at beating Biden. And I'll tell you why. Because I have been out there, my friends, touching grass and speaking with people about what they think. And a lot of people have said, I hope it's not Trump. A lot of regular Americans who don't know much about politics are like, I vote for DeSantis, not Biden. If it is Biden, you might actually see DeSantis win. But I think DeSantis campaign is doing a very, very poor job. And the supporters for DeSantis are, yikes. But let's get back to this. I don't want to deviate too much. So let's wind it back. Let's talk about going back in time to this election here. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the 1960 United States presidential election in which Democratic John F. Kennedy won. Republican Richard Nixon was defeated Well, good on you, Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson. Boy, we all know how that turned out. Yikes. I suppose JFK would have preferred to have lost at this point, but, what am I supposed to say? He had Nixon with Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. for vice president. Look at that. Look at that strapping young Richard Nixon. That's crazy, huh? Vice president, 36th vice president of the United States, Richard Nixon. All right. So let's jump down to the issue at hand, and we'll talk about Civil War. Here's what they say. A sample of how close the election was can be seen in California, Nixon's home state. Kennedy seemed to have carried the state by 37,000 votes when all the voting precincts reported. But when the absentee ballots were counted a week later, Nixon came from behind to win the state by 36,000 votes. Similarly, in Hawaii, official results showed Nixon winning by a small margin of 141, with the state being called for him early Wednesday morning. Acting Governor James Kealoha, Kealoha, there you go, certified the Republican electors. Let me just repeat that for you. Certified the Republican electors. And they cast Hawaii's 3 electoral votes for Nixon. However, clear discrepancies existed in the official electoral tabulations. The Democrats petitioned for a recount in Hawaii Circuit Court. The court challenge was still ongoing at the time of the Electoral Courts Electoral Counts Act safe harbor deadline. But Democratic electors still convened the Lalani Palace on the constitutionally mandated date of December 19th and cast their votes for Kennedy. The recount, completed before Christmas, resulted in Kennedy being declared the winner by 115 votes. On December 30th, the Circuit Court ruled that Hawaii's 3 electoral votes should go to Kennedy. It was decided that a new certificate was necessary. With only 2 days remaining before Congress convened on January 6, 1961, to count and certify the Electoral College votes, a letter to Congress saying a certificate was on the way was rushed out by registered airmail. Both Democrat and Republican electoral votes from Hawaii were presented for counting on January 6, 1961. And Vice President Nixon, who presided over certification, graciously and saying without the intent of establishing a precedent, requested unanimous consent that the Democratic votes for Kennedy to be counted. That's right. The Republicans were certified as the actual electoral votes. Democrats? Well, wait a minute. They met anyway and declared themselves duly elected electors and cast votes? Fraud and conspiracy, I say. I stand with Michigan against this horrible... Oh, you get the point. Back then, Democrats did it. Why would anyone else do anything different today? They're just following historical precedent. Granted, and graciously saying, without the intent of establishing precedent, but there you go. Here we are. For this, the Michigan electors will be criminally charged. They're being charged. Now, of course, as the story goes, they're saying that some of these Republican electors have come out and said, I was tricked. I was duped. I had nothing to do with this because Republicans are cowards. Come on, man. Look, maybe you're a Republican. I'm not saying you're a coward. I'm saying there is a strong percentage of people who are Republican who are cowards. I got to tell you, the reality is, maybe not nowadays, but 10 years ago, it took a lot of bravery for LGBT types of people to come out and tell the world who they are. In fact, still to this day, it's very difficult for people to come out and be LGBT, despite the fact, I know many people are going to say, but every corporation, every logo, yeah, but there is still social stigma. I look at that and I'm just like, here's the reality, man. Conservatives are too scared, not as a whole, but too many of them. Don't speak up, don't speak out, don't stand up for what they believe in, and quite simply will not criminally charge Democrats. Throw the book at them, lock them up. They want to play this game in Michigan? Why won't Republicans do anything about it? Your guess is as good as mine, I suppose. We learned a lot about Fox News recently. Looks like just a whole bunch of controlled opposition, I suppose. So this is where we are. This is where we currently are, my friends. Some kind of civil war. Take a look at this post. So I tweeted, "You are in a civil war." Rob McNeely, who's this guy? He's verified. He says, TUSC founder, photographer, fabricator, says, "Are you saying they did not sign their names?" Huh? What? What are you talking about? I didn't say anything about that. Tyler Brown responds, "No, just that they're charging Republicans for the exact same ish Democrats have done in the past." Fitzgerald responds, "When?" And we have this post. In 2016, a small group of Democratic electors pledged to vote for another candidate in the hopes of swaying Republican electors to vote for anyone but Trump. They were known as Hamilton electors after a Federalist paper in which Alexander Hamilton, blah, 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 blah. You get the point. Congress certified Trump's Electoral College victory on January 6. Now, hold on there a minute. We got a fact check for you. Fact check from factcheck.org. This is how they manipulate. It says, Post misleadingly equates 2016 Democratic effort to Trump's 2020 alternate electors. This is from a year ago, 2022. And they basically say that this post is not true. Faithless electors are people who vote for someone else. Like a Trump elector gets, someone votes for Trump, a Republican elector is appointed, and they say, you know what, I'm going to vote Democrat instead. In fact, you had them. That's allowed. And there are problems with it, fine, whatever, but it's allowed. But that's not what we're talking about. You see, today what we're talking about is if you go back to Hawaii, Republicans were certified as the winner in Hawaii, but they decided to count the Democrat votes instead. Now, I can already hear the liberals saying, a court ordered it, Tim. Duh. And in this instance, it went swimmingly. The Republican electors filled out the requisite paperwork for their pending court decision, which rejected their claims, and it was over. Joe Biden got the votes. The system worked. So why criminally charge the people who are following procedure? Because you are in a civil war. It's just that only Democrats are fighting. You don't need to have hot conflict when the Republicans lay down when the Democrats come charging in. That's just the way it is. Now, maybe I shouldn't call them Republicans and Democrats because certainly some Republicans are on the side of the Democrats. But this is where we're currently at. We're going to learn a lot from Devon Archer, I imagine. And so we'll see. That's all I can really say. Where this all goes, I don't know, but I do want to shout out Sound of Freedom. 125 million at the box office, number 3 in the country. Yo, we are turning this thing around. We are fighting in unique ways. I talked about this in my earlier segment about the border wall and stuff. I do not believe our problems are solved by laws and walls. It's a good one, right? Our problems are solved by culture. Ron Paul said abortion shouldn't be illegal. It should be unthinkable. He's right. Now, I know you're saying people shouldn't be allowed to get abortions. Many of you, not all of you. Many of you probably, to some degree pro-choice in a similar position to me. But the point is simply this. You don't need to ban it if no doctor would perform one, if no person would seek one. If our culture said it is immoral, wrong, and we will not tolerate it, you don't need law. You need law for like property disputes, which is why they say property is 9/10 of the law. Because we can all agree on like, hey, don't kill people. But when someone's like, according to this document, you owe me $1,000. I know, but according to clause 3, I don't. Now you've got issues. Stealing from people. Yeah, we do have laws for a reason. I'm excited to see where this testimony goes. But ultimately, I think what we need to be focusing on is building culture. I'm not saying to ignore the stuff. I'd love it if Republicans actually started going after Democrats in similar ways. Will that just lead to hot conflict? Perhaps. So maybe the path towards winning this is dominating culture and shutting it all down, making it unthinkable for Democrats to even go near what they're doing. We'll see. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.